Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's workshop, Lawyer Like an Athlete. And first, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Um, Many of you probably already know Stephanie Breck, um, but she is an experienced litigator with over 20 years. Um, Experience and mainly employment law from the management side. Stephanie is currently working toward gaining a certificate in traumatic studies to bring a more trauma-informed perspective to her practice, as well as provide support services to attorneys and firms who need assistance managing um, clients impacted by trauma. Um, Stephanie's from Columbia Falls, and I try to stop in and visit her and her husband, Justin, when I can, when I'm up in the Flathead. Um, our main speaker is Amy Wood. Through executive coaching and CLE programming, Maine-based psychologist Amy Wood helps attorneys reach greater levels of achievement and fulfillment. She is the author of the ABA book, Lawyer Like an Athlete, and is often called on for her expert testimony by media ranging from Maine Public Radio to Parade Magazine. And she earned her doctorate at Alder University and is certified by the College of Executive Coaching. And Amy did another webinar for us a few years ago, and she graciously offered to make this presentation today. And she will tell you more about her book later on and how you can order it. One housekeeping note, attendance will be tracked through Zoom, and you must be logged in on the meeting for the full 60 minutes. Your Montana plea transcript will be updated by the SABAR Montana within a week from completion of this plea. And if you are an out-of-stater and need more help on that, you can get a hold of Jeannie Etchart, and her email is on the emails you've received. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Stephanie.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I'm happy to be here. So today we're going to be talking about taking care of yourself and why it's important to your role as an attorney. We should be, and we're required to be mentally and physically healthy to provide competent service to our clients. I think we all know that. It's part of the rules. But there's another factor, and that is that you matter and your life matters, and how you operate on a daily basis in this profession deeply impacts the quality of your personal life, your family life, and your confidence, etc. And if you're dealing with addictions, anxiety, depression, overwhelm, maybe you're dealing with trauma from your past or even in your present, all of those things wreak havoc on your well-being and your ability to provide competent service to your clients. So the book Amy's talking about today, she's going to be talking about some great tools and systems that you can use to improve these things in your life. So moving to slide 2, we're just going to touch on a few of the rules that come into play when we're talking about attorney wellness and their well-being. The first of which is competence, and a lawyer shall provide competent representation. And competent representation is about knowledge, skill, thoroughness, preparation, etc. But it's also about being mentally and physically able to provide all of that. And I did note here, attorney wellness and health are increasingly recognized as integral to maintaining, oh, I'm sorry, I can't even read what I put here, but maintaining your duties as a professional here, as an attorney. And the rules of professional conduct address this through like Rule 1.16A2, and it requires withdrawal when a lawyer's physical and mental condition materially impairs their ability to serve the client. So that's one of the main ones, but also diligence, Rule 1.3 and 1.4 communication. Those things are all going to come into play too. If you're struggling with maintaining your practice and your life, these things can be impacted as well. I just referred to 1.16A2. We talked about that material impairment. That's key. And a lot of people I think that alcohol and drugs is what's required for that material impairment. And I would tell you that that's not necessarily true, that people can be having issues with their mental health or their physical health that have nothing to do with such addictions. And so an attorney may need help or may need support or may need some tools to help them get out of whatever issue they're dealing with. And so some of the things that Amy will talk about today are gonna help you with that. And then if you're struggling as an attorney, and we have responsibilities on us as well to manage perhaps the responsibilities of other people, such as other attorneys or non-lawyer assistants and things like that. So we want to make sure that we're on our game so that we're also able to manage them and be managing the work that they're doing so that it isn't causing any violations as well, missing statutes of limitations, things like that. Rule 8.3 talks about the duty to report the misconduct of another lawyer. And so perhaps you notice some sort of misconduct with a colleague. You have a duty to disclose if you know of a particular rule violation, your knowledge is unprivileged, and the conduct raises a substantial question as to the lawyer's honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness to practice. And that applies to the misconduct of any lawyer, including judges. There is one exception, and it is the duty to report professional misconduct specifically exempts disclosure of information gained by an attorney or judge while participating in an approved lawyer assistance program. So if you were to learn something while participating in that and being involved, that isn't something that you'd be required to disclose. And that leads me to the issue of confidentiality and the lawyer assistance program. Information and actions taken by MLAP shall be privileged and held in the strictest confidence, and that information is not going to be disclosed to any person or entity outside of MLAP. So we want to encourage people and help them understand that as MLAP operates here, the lawyer assistance program, it really is meant to serve you, help other attorneys, and it is confidential. So we want to encourage people to use the program. And as far as our duty beyond the rules of professional responsibility, I always like to touch on this, that we are a self-regulating profession, and so we should offer each other gentle correction. And I think to some degree, we're our brothers and sisters keepers, and that sounds a little harsh. Talking to another attorney about your concerns for them really is just an act of compassion for that person and saying, hey, I noticed X, Y, and Z. It looks like you're struggling. How can I help? Is there anything I can do? Some support to be given to that person. You could refer them out as well to the MLAP program, or perhaps you could suggest that they read Amy's book that we're going to be hearing about today. But what I want to say is if you're concerned about a colleague, talk to them about it. And if you need help figuring out what that looks like, you can certainly contact MLAP. Contact Mike Larson. He can help you figure out how to say it, what to do. And I would offer myself as well, Stephanie Breck, if anybody ever needs support or help related to any of the things I've talked about today. So without further ado, again, I'm going to turn this over to Amy, and I'm going to, let's see.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Yeah.
I appreciate that introduction. So I'm going to share my slides now. All right, can everyone see? All right, so just a brief introduction, just to tell you a little bit more about me as a psychologist and tell you why I am doing this webinar today. Again, the name is Amy Wood. I'm a doctor of psychology and I live in Maine. And I've always worked with adults, and probably about 10 or 12 years ago, started working a lot with attorneys. And that happened because I have a friend who's an attorney in Florida. And she told me at that time that the Florida bar was really trying to promote attorney wellness, and they needed someone with that kind of expertise to do CLE webinars for the bar. And so I contacted them and I started working a lot with the Florida bar. And then that has taken off in many other states. As you can see, we're doing one in your state. And I've done work like this in a bunch of others. Lawyer Like an Athlete, I had a workshop that I did, a day-long workshop called Lawyer Like an Athlete, and it's all about how to be happier and healthy at work by borrowing strategies from the world of elite athletes. And my book, Lawyer Like an Athlete, came out based on that workshop, and the success I've had with it came out in August of 2024 from the ABA. And I'll remind you of this at the end as well as now, that if you want to get a copy, Mike is going to send all of you attending today a special flyer. It's an email flyer where you can get a 30% discount. So you'll get that after the webinar. The book is available through the ABA website. It's available on Amazon. It's available pretty much anywhere that you buy books. So also want to let you know before we begin today that if you have questions following the webinar, I want to give you my address, email address, and that's Amy Wood at amywoodpsyd.com, or you can always call me at 207-232-0390. And speaking of questions, we will make time for questions at the end. So if you have any questions during the webinar, if you just want to type them into the chat box, I'll take them at the end. So we've done the introduction. Up next, we're going to talk about the attorney stress problem. Why are attorneys so stressed? And then what do we do about that? And that's what I call the rules of the endurance game. And it's all strategies for your peak performance. So bringing your best self to work and finding that you're more fulfilled personally as well, not just at the office. And then we'll do a wrap up and questions and answers. So before we get into the content today, I'd like you to just take a few moments to focus. What can you do better right now to be more in the moment, to be more present for this experience without feeling like you have to take notes or memorize anything? Try to look at this like it's just some time out for yourself today, where you can just sit back and enjoy this and trust that whatever is important for you to remember, it will stick with you. And you're going to learn a lot. Try not to let it overwhelm you. Don't go through this webinar thinking, oh, I've got to do all of these great strategies right now, or I'm not going to be successful, because that's just going to make you more stressed. Trust that what is right for you to do, you'll do. So anything else that you can do before we get started, whether that's closing a door, opening a door, getting a quick glass of water, just sitting more comfortably in your chair, removing something on your desk that's distracting to you, anything that you want to really immerse yourself fully in the next 45 minutes or so. So what is the problem that attorneys have? Most attorneys come to me. I'm a coach, and I do quite a bit of coaching with attorneys and a lot of other professionals. And what I see the difference between professionals who are all under stress, because face it, we live in a very stressful world with a lot of demands that are only escalating as technology advances. So we get too much information every day, too many distractions, too much disruption. Change is happening faster and faster. So everybody is amped up. Everybody is feeling behind, but especially attorneys. And why is that? In the research that I've done, I found that most professionals are stressed because they're under the gun in a lot of ways, but particularly attorneys are under stress for three reasons. One is that they often feel that their lives and their work are outside of control. So they may be, for example, under the control of a schedule that's dictated by the court system. Another reason is they're doing adversarial work a lot, dealing with opposing attorneys, upset clients, difficult judges, you name it. And thirdly, they feel like they don't have a life outside of work because they're just so incredibly busy all the time. So that leads to very high stress. So if you're looking at most professionals here, you're seeing, yeah, again, we're all under stress, but the attorney stress level is especially high. So even though a lot of professionals are under immense stress, when you compare that to attorneys, we see that most professionals are under what we would call average stress, where attorneys are under extreme stress. And that is what we are trying to address here. So why bring athletes into it? Well, what I noticed when I was doing my research on attorneys and the stress they experience, it occurred to me that like professional athletes, attorneys are in the spotlight a lot. There's high expectations. The stakes are always very high when they're performing. They're expected to not make mistakes, to be perfect. They have very high ambition. And what athletes do better than attorneys, I think, and this is what you can learn from the webinar today, is athletes are much better, I believe, at taking care of themselves so they can perform at their best, where I think lawyers work themselves too hard. So this quote comes from my book, and I think it captures the reason why this webinar is important. And that quote is, like star athletes, attorneys are elite professionals requiring an elevated regimen for being at their best. So many times attorneys will start a coaching relationship with me by saying, I've read some great self-help books in reducing stress. I've gone to some conferences on wellness. I've listened to some great podcasts, but none of it really works for me. And the reason it's not working is usually popular podcasts about wellness and books, etc., are targeting the people who are dealing with what we call average stress. High stress, yes, but not as high as what you're all experiencing. So how do we deal with that stress? First of all, we define what stress is and how much stress we want to have. And when I say want to have, what I mean is we don't want to obliterate stress from our lives. Not only is that an unreasonable goal, because stress is all around us all the time because we're moving so quickly in our culture, but it's not really what you want. Think about it. If you didn't have any stress, life would be pretty dull. So the right amount of stress is just enough fire lit under you so that you are excited, you're motivated. For example, when you took the bar exam, if you didn't have any stress about that, you wouldn't have done very well. But any test you've ever taken, before the test, I better study for this. I better create room in my schedule to focus on this, or I'm not going to pass. That's the kind of stress we need to move forward if we want to be ambitious. So we don't want to get rid of that. But we want to have enough stress, but not so much that we're overwhelmed. So you're overwhelmed by stress when you feel like there's so much stress that you can't cope with it. And that's not good. That's what we're trying to avoid. The other part we want to have in this equation, we want that right amount of stress that's keeping us motivated and inspired and excited about our work and our life. We also want to take time for recovery. This is what athletes know. And this is what we all understand because we look at athletes and we say, well, of course, athletes need to recover. They're doing physical work. But the thing you're going to learn today is whether you're doing physical work or mental work, one involves the other. So for athletes, they need to do mental work as well as physical work to be at their best physically. And attorneys need to do physical work, not to the extent that athletes do, but they need to be in shape enough to be really, really healthy, to be alert and feel alive. So this is where you become successful. This is what we're after. This is what I'm going to show you how to do today, how to have that right amount of stress, but also work in that recovery time so you can do your job better and you can have a more fulfilling life. So one thing that I find really interesting about athletes, if you look at the athletes you really admire, the athletes you really respect, who have become very successful, it's because they focus on their job as an athlete as their top priority. And they understand that in order to keep that as a top priority, they have to nurture their performance regularly with these four components. And we'll start at the top. First of all, thriving relationships. When you look at successful athletes, you note that they have an entourage usually consisting of their friends, their closest family members, sometimes their pets, people who help them to perform better, like their coach, massage therapist. We can go on and on. They have very complex entourages, but the idea is that entourage is all about supporting them in every way that they need to do well. So personal relationships and professional relationships. They also, if we go to the right here, engage in exquisite self-care. They take exemplary care of their bodies and their minds because they understand that's what they need to do well when they're out in the field. Then they engage in nourishing diversion. So they do things away from work so that they can rest, so that they can engage in different things other than their sport, especially allowing their brain to do other things. So, for example, a lot of NFL players engage in chess games with each other away from the field because it's fun, it's a nice escape, it allows them to stop thinking about football for a while. And then what successful athletes have is a grounded perspective. They're positive thinkers. They know that they can't control their thoughts, but they can influence their thoughts. And they know how to distance themselves from thoughts that are bringing them down. So it's the same for lawyers. If you want to be more successful, first you've got to put your job in the middle of your life. It's a top priority. And many attorneys will come to me and say, I didn't really like the last coach I worked with or that last therapist I had because they were really trying to get me to take my job less seriously and put it to the side, which is not an answer for attorneys because you're doing very demanding work and you can't just let things go. But what you can do is adapt your profession with this attorney, the successful athlete model we just went over. So it starts at the top for you too with thriving relationships. You need to have supportive people in your life so that you can do what you do well and feel optimistic and feel good about things. So you need friends, you need family in your corner, you need colleagues in your corner too. And you need to have good relationships with your clients as well. We'll get more into that. Exquisite self-care for you. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to go all out like an athlete, but what it does mean is you have to be taking good enough care of yourself so that you don't have really bad habits physically that are dragging you down. Okay. Then nourishing diversions, just like successful athletes, you've got to have interests away from work so that your mind can rest, so that you can engage sometimes in silliness and frivolity, because you'll come back to your work sharper and more engaged from that. And then you've also got to have a grounded perspective. Again, that means being positive, knowing that you can get distance from your thoughts so they don't have control over you, knowing how to deal with negative self-talk, because we all have that. Every adult has that, and you've got to learn how to deal with that better. So now we're going to go into the rules of the endurance game, and these are all strategies that will help you to achieve what we just talked about. In other words, how to find that balance between having a thriving career and also a thriving personal life. So my first suggestion for you, if you want to really be successful as an attorney, you probably saw this coming. First thing you want to do is make health your foundation. Because if you're not feeling good physically, if you're not feeling alert and energized from having good health, you're not going to be able to stay in the game of lawyering for very long. So, the first piece of this, get enough sleep. Most attorneys I talk to, and actually most professionals I talk to, they do not get enough sleep. Most Americans right now, by the way, don't get enough sleep. The average amount of sleep an adult needs is about 8 hours. That's why we always hear that number. But we need anywhere from 6 hours of sleep typically to 10 or 12 hours of sleep. And you know where you land. You know how much sleep you need to wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go, ready to greet the day with a positive perspective. So sometimes I see attorneys who say to me, I want to get more work done, so I'm trying to sleep less. I'm trying to train myself to need less hours. And we can't do that. We need the sleep we need. It would be great if we could train ourselves to function on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. And sometimes we get excited about that because we hear stories of famous people who are able to do that. For example, Warren Buffett is known for sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night and being just fine and having really productive days. Same with Martha Stewart, but that's because they're wired that way. So if you're wired that way, that's great. But if not, you have to honor what you need and get the sleep that is sufficient for you. You have to eat well, exercise sufficiently, and drink plenty of water. There's so much information out there about this, and we all hear it all the time as adults. So, what I will do is summarize this to say about 80% of the time, if you're eating well, eating healthful foods that all nourish your body, and then you let yourself go 20% of the time and eat what you want, you'll probably be okay, unless you are on some kind of medical doctor where you can't, a medical diet where you can't veer from that. So don't be rigid about your eating, but try to make good decisions 80% of the time. Same with exercise. If you can get exercise in about 3 times a week, an hour each time, to the point where you're huffing and puffing and can't really talk, that's great. But if you can't do that much, do what you can. The key really is to move every day just a little bit, and we'll get more into that. And drink plenty of water. We all need about 8 glasses of water a day, distributed throughout the day, not all at once. So what I do myself is I just make that a project. I decide, okay, I'm going to have my 64 ounces of water today, throughout the day. And that's just a goal that I have every day, just like a lot of other things that I do, that are projects. Establish a reviving, unrushed morning routine. This is another strategy that really works. It helps to put you in the right frame of mind to have a really effective, productive workday, whether you're working at home or at an office. So when you do this, I think that you stand out because most adults do not have this in their life. Most adults I talk to, most professionals, especially a lot of attorneys, they end up not getting enough sleep. So they're pushing that snooze button in the morning, delaying getting up. Then when they get up, they don't have enough time to get ready. They don't look forward to getting up. They're not in a good mood when they get up. And then sometimes, if you're living with other people, you might get into a conversation that becomes complicated in the morning. The worst thing that can happen in the morning is when you try to discuss something important with your kids or your spouse or your roommates, and you don't have time to finish the conversation because you're so rushed trying to get out the door, and then people start the day on a bad note. So when I say establish a reviving, unrushed morning routine, I mean, first of all, wake up having had enough sleep. Do something in the morning that you're looking forward to so that you're not dreading getting up. So, for example, having a morning ritual that you really like having your morning coffee while you catch up on emails or doing a few stretches, reading something inspiring. Try to do as much as you can the night before to prepare yourself for the next day. Like get the clothes out that you want to wear, or if you're going to work, pack your lunch the night before so you have less to do in the morning. And certainly don't get involved in any kind of deep or difficult conversation with anyone. And at the end of the day, establish a relaxing, unwinding evening routine. One thing I hear a lot from attorneys is that they are unable to fall asleep at the end of the day because their minds are racing. And the reason for that is they haven't really taken a time to segue out of work and into sleep, which takes about 2 to 3 hours of winding down. So look at your evenings as a time to not work all the time, but a time to do things that are soothing and comforting and let you relax into the evening so that by the time you get in bed, you're already wound down a little bit. Just some tips for doing that. Don't do anything overstimulating in the evening. Now, a lot of attorneys tell me they have to work right up until bedtime, but a lot of the advice you're hearing from me, you have to take steps away from bad habits before you can build new ones. And the new ones, all of the ones that I'm talking about today, will help you to get your work done in less time and see better results. So there may be a break time in there where you're feeling, okay, I'm not working enough. I'm not getting work done fast enough. But I promise you, if you do the things that I'm advocating, you'll see that you're not only catching up with work, but it takes less time to do it because you're much more energized when you're going at your work from taking better care of yourself. So how can you wind down? When I say less stimulating, I'm talking about what you do to wind down. So typically adults need about an hour between when they shut off their technology, so TV, phone, laptop, iPad, Kindle, whatever it is, shut it down an hour before you plan to go to sleep because the lighting of technology keeps you awake. Keep your phone out of your bedroom because even if it's sitting there on your nightstand and you're not looking at it, your brain knows it's there and it's staying on, waiting for an alert to come in. Don't watch anything too stimulating on TV. Don't have, just like the morning, difficult conversations. Try not to drink anything or eat anything that might get you going at night, and try to get into this habit because you'll find you're sleeping a lot deeper. And when you sleep more deeply, you wake up more recharged and sharper and more able to deal with whatever that new day throws at you. So next strategy, determine your happiness and productivity essentials. We have so much stuff in our culture. Along with all the information that we get, we also have things. We're always accumulating. We're always getting packages delivered. We're always buying new things to accomplish new goals. So the first step here, understanding that when you have too much stuff in your life that you don't need, it just creates stress. So the first step here is to toss what you don't need. So just right now, whatever space you're in, like if you're in an office space, look around and ask, is there anything I don't need? Now, right now, I'm looking at a coffee cup from earlier today, that I don't need right now. And it's distracting to me looking at it because it reminds me I have to take that coffee cup and put it in the sink. So getting out of your workspace what you don't need could also mean something like you have your stapler in front of you and you might need it next week, but you don't need it right now. So put it away somewhere so you don't have to look at it. So going through not just your office, but through your closet, through every room in your house, through your garage, looking in your car, all the environments you're in the most, and asking, what can I get rid of? Because that's going to reduce your stress level. So what can you sell? What can you give away? What can you take to Goodwill? That's the idea. And hold on to only what makes you happy and serves a purpose. So when we say happiness and productivity essentials, this is what I mean. What you need in your life to be happy and what you need to get a job done, whether it's a home improvement job or a work job. This is what you should have at your disposal. And you will find that when you reduced your life to these essentials for happiness and productivity, you will be able to breathe with a great sense of relief. And keep your home and workspace free of clutter. So don't just do a clean sweep one time and let it pile up again. ask yourself, how can I keep this going? How can I, on a regular basis, be getting rid of things so I don't end up with more clutter again? And a big part of this is streamlining your decision making for efficiency. One reason we're also overwhelmed is we have so many options every day, whether it's, which email am I going to return first, or which kind of jam I'm going to buy at the supermarket. There's just too many choices. So how can you streamline? One great example is when Obama was president for those 2 terms, he had a rule for himself that he would only wear blue and gray suits because that took away the complication of figuring out what to wear every day. He just had 2 choices. And his thinking was that he needed to focus on bringing his energy into more important decisions that he had as the president of the United States. He didn't need to be making getting dressed in the morning any more difficult. So ask yourself, how can you streamline your decision making for greater efficiency? What extra choices can you get rid of so that you don't spend too much time trying to narrow things down from too many choices? So the next tip, practice the true meaning of work-life balance. So one very common request I get from all professionals, including attorneys, but every other professional usually starts with, I've really been working on achieving work-life balance and I just can't do it. And I think maybe there's something wrong with me or I haven't read the right book. And I intervene and I say, you know what? The reason you can't achieve work-life balance is because it doesn't exist. So when we think of work-life balance with work on one side of a scale and life on the other with a firm, indelible boundary between, that's a very old-fashioned kind of goal that has become a myth because we're so connected now and we're not just working at offices anymore with our home someplace else. Some of us are working at home. Um, a lot of us are doing both, going back and forth, and we're so connected by technology that we're available 24/7. It's a lot easier to get out of that. So this other way of achieving balance that I'm going to tell you about, it's much more reasonable and it can change your life for the better if you practice it. So when we think about balance, it's an internal feeling that we want to achieve. It's a sense of harmony, a sense of peace, and being able to just be calm in your life and not be frazzled all the time and not feel like you're being pulled in a million directions. So the idea here is not to try to achieve this work over here, personal life over here kind of balance. That's impossible these days. But to design your home and workspace to bring out that sense of balance, which is you feeling at your best. We all want to feel grounded and balanced. So to do that, ask yourself, just like you ask what clutter can I get rid of? What surrounding elements nourish my mind, body, and spirit? So think of the environments you function in most where you're in command of those environments. So your house as a whole or your apartment, wherever you happen to live, the individual rooms in your living space, your workspace, whether that's at home or somewhere else or both, and probably your car. A lot of us are in our cars a lot. What can you do in those environments to feel the way you want to feel? To nourish yourself and help yourself feel balanced and calm. Another way to look at this is what sounds and sights and aromas and feelings bring me most alive. So it could be, if you're looking around your workspace, that you have a piece of artwork on the wall that you used to love that was very inspiring, but now you're just tired of looking at it. So think of something else you can bring into your office in place of that will help you to feel alive when you're at work and motivated. In terms of sounds, a lot of attorneys tell me that they get stressed out driving because they're listening to the news and it's amping them up in ways that aren't positive. So I suggest, well, you're in control. Why don't you listen to something else when you're driving? You could be listening to fun podcasts or music you really like. You can listen to comedy shows, whatever it is. What sights do you want to be seeing? What aromas do you want to have? Maybe there's a scented candle that you feel helps you to feel calm and balanced and serene. So the idea here is to think about how you can redesign these spaces that you are in charge of. And by the way, this can really help to counter that sense of not being in control. in other ways as an attorney, like the dates that you have to be in court, for example, or how your clients might react when you tell them news they don't like. And you're finding, when we're talking about control here, that as we move through this webinar, you're gaining more and more ways that maybe you haven't been exercising to feel more in control when you can't control a lot of things around you. So the next strategy, stack your strengths. Now, as you might imagine, a lot of psychologists have been concerned for a long time now about stress. Remember, we talked about too much stress and the right amount. Well, we all have too much. We all have too many things to do. So psychologists wonder, how can we help people to reduce that sense of overwhelm from living in a culture that has way too many demands and too many options and is going too fast? And what we have determined is that when you focus on what you do well and do more of that, like what you do organically well, what you're drawn to, what you're called to do, what when you're doing it makes you feel like you're really in the flow of your work and or life, the more you go with those natural inclinations and let go of what doesn't go against your nature, the less stressed you are. So I was born in the 70s, not in the 70s, I was raised in the 70s. And back then the idea was do everything yourself. So my parents learned how to fix their car. They learned how to do their own taxes. They learned all kinds of things about renovating the house. They didn't necessarily delegate. So they were doing too much, but it didn't feel like too much because they didn't have technology then. They didn't have the fast pace we're dealing with. Now it's really about letting go of anything that is not a natural strength so that you can focus more fully on what you're really naturally, organically called to do. So let me give you a couple of examples. I have a friend who's great at throwing dinner parties. She loves it. I do not like throwing dinner parties. They make me anxious. Um, so when she tells me, when I ask her, how do you do this? It sounds like so much work. And she's, oh, it's no work at all. I love doing it. You just put food out and people eat. Now, for me, it wouldn't seem that easy, but it's a strength for her. So when she is throwing a dinner party, she feels alive. She feels like everything is clicking for her. Everything's resonating. For me, one thing I love to do is I love to swim. I find swimming really relaxing. It helps to calm my mind, clear my head. And sometimes I can feel when I'm swimming like I'm all one with the world. It doesn't feel hard to me, but other people I know hate swimming and it feels like a struggle. So whatever it is, whether it's something you do at work, or something you do away from work, it all helps if you feel like it's something that you can do organically, that it's just something you were born with, and do less of what goes against your nature whenever you can drop things that don't really appeal to you. Now, there are always things that we have to do, whether we want to do those things or not. But whenever you can, delegate. Stop doing things that make you feel like you're pushing against something, because all that's doing is draining you and making you less effective. And the real way to use your strengths to get more effective results, to get better outcomes, is to combine your strengths with the strengths of others to get better, easier results. So I'm going to give you a personal and professional example of this. Personally, it's about dividing up home chores. So if you think about how we used to divide up chores at home, it used to be according to gender. Like many years ago, men were expected to do the finances and women were expected to cook. But what if the men are horrible at money and dealing with finances, and the women, what if they hate to cook? So now we do it according to who's better at what and who finds chores less distasteful than other chores. So at my house, my husband does the dishes because he doesn't mind doing the dishes, where I really don't like the dishes. I cook because I don't mind that. He doesn't really like to cook. And there are some things that both of us have to do and neither likes, like taking the garbage out. So we take turns. So how could that work better where you live with the people you share space with? Now let me give you a professional example. So I was consulting with a law firm recently where we were trying to identify who was good at what and divide those strengths up so that everybody could collaborate more powerfully. So one of the attorneys at this firm, he loved to copy edit contracts where other people hated doing that. They found it so tedious. So he said, well, I'll do that. Give me your contracts and I can do more of that. And then if you could help me with organizing, that would be great. So other people who were more organized did that. Other people who were really good at dealing with upset clients, they started doing that for other people, and they started to produce better results. So figure out what your strengths are. And just one tip for doing that, what do you get complimented on the most and what do you shrug off when you're complimented? So if someone says to you, you know, you're really good at handiwork, I can't believe you made that. And you say, well, it was easy. It was common sense. Think about that. Not everyone has that skill, but because it comes naturally for you, you tend to minimize it. So take compliments seriously and ask, okay, is that a strength of mine? And how can I develop that to get better results and less stress? And cultivate healthy relationships. I've already mentioned this, but I want to go into this a little bit further because a lot of attorneys tell me they don't have time for relationships and they don't see that if they step out and make that time, they'll be able to come back to their work and feel more supported, feel more focused, feel more confident. It's so essential to regularly nurture your personal relationships and also your professional relationships because we're human beings and we need that support. I was talking to a medical doctor recently who said that during the pandemic, he found that his regular patients who would come every year for their annual physicals were starting to get sick, not with the virus, but with other things. And they were starting to feel depressed and anxious when they'd always been in good health mentally. And what he noted is that they were spending less time because of the pandemic in social situations, not just, you know, one-on-one with their closest friends and family members, but just being out in society with other people they didn't know, like walking down sidewalks with other people, or standing in line with other people, or attending a sporting event or a musical concert with other people. We need to have these experiences because we literally feed off of human energy. We need it to be happy and healthy. So really important. Make time for having fun with people in your life, especially those who bring out your best. So what I mean by that is the people you have the most fun with of all, like the people you can really let go of any expectations with. You don't have to be on for these people. You can laugh really hard with these people. You can really be silly and go back to being a kid again with these people. You may think, oh, that's being irresponsible. I need to be an adult. But you know what? When you act like this, when you just let yourself go with your favorite people, you're giving your brain a rest. You're energizing yourself, invigorating yourself, and you bring that back to your work with you and are able to work at a higher level. And watch your thinking. We talked about this already, the importance that athletes place on having the right perspective. And here's how you do that. First, you get out of reaction mode. Many of us are stressed all the time because we don't ever take breaks. We're always responding to someone. And when we respond quickly without taking time to think through our responses, we make a lot more mistakes. We end up in conflict a lot more. There's a lot more misunderstanding, misinterpretation. So particularly when you get hit with, let's say, a text or an email that you find upsetting and you don't want to just fire an email or text back, stop and think, where is that going to go? It's probably going to escalate. So anytime that you're stressed, ask, you know, what is stressing me out? What about this thought is stressing me out? And how can I respond to this in a way that's going to help things get better, not worse? In terms of having a positive mindset, this next strategy, which is about resetting your mindset, is something that athletes do all the time. They start over with a clean slate when they're starting to feel or think in a negative way about something. So think of this scenario where an athlete is running a marathon and within the first 10 minutes they trip a little bit, or they see one of their competitors they don't really like run past them and they start to have negative thoughts like, I'm not going to do well today. I'm not going to be able to win this. I'm never going to beat that person. And they know that that's only going to make them perform at a lower level. So they immediately say, okay, this is a reset. I tripped back there, but that is done. I saw that person I don't like. It's over. We're starting again. Race is starting right now. And that allows them to get rid of those negative thoughts and move forward with optimism. So for you, when you're thinking about being a lawyer, think about maybe you come out of a negative morning. Maybe you had a really difficult meeting. Maybe you had a bad performance review. Someone got angry with you and it's really ruining your day. You can do the same thing. You can say, okay, the morning's over. I'm starting fresh. Um, New workday right in front of me. And that will really help to bring on enthusiasm and help you do better with the rest of the day. Cheer yourself on. This is something athletes do all the time. They imagine that their fans, in their minds, they're imagining their fans cheering them on from the sidelines or saying to them, you know, you can do this, you've got what it takes, you're going to make a difference, whatever they need to hear. And the reason they do it this way, having their fans cheer them on rather than say to themselves, I can do this, I'm going to make it, I'm going to get through this, is because studies show that when you imagine other people saying these positive things to you and being your cheerleaders, it's more effective. It works faster. So the next time you're having a difficult day, imagine the people who really are supportive in your life cheering you, saying, you know, you're going to be okay. You have what it takes to get through this difficult day. Feels like a struggle, but I know you can do it. And see how empowering that is. And going back to this idea of pausing and thinking before you respond, ask yourself why, when you have certain thoughts, they're upsetting to you. Oftentimes, we are upset by our own thinking because it's not based on reality. Human beings in general, when we're upset, when something stressful has happened, we go to an extreme with it. So you had some sort of failure in your life, you made some sort of mistake, and you imagine, you know, the future, I'm never going to be successful again. Um, I shouldn't have ever become an attorney. You know, someone breaks up with you and you think, I'm never going to find the right relationship. I'm a loser, etc. When you're having those thoughts that are so extreme, ask, okay, is this really true? Okay, maybe I made a mistake today, but does that mean that I'm not a good attorney? Does that mean I'm not capable? And then what you do is you ask, what's the evidence behind that? You know, act as if you're taking these extreme thoughts to court. So if you're imagining, you know, I'm a total loser, I'm never going to recover from this, and you start looking for evidence, there is none to support that. But to the contrary, you're going to have a lot of evidence when you think this through because you're an adult and you've gone through a lot in your life that you actually can get through hard times. So remember, when you're stressed, think about the thoughts you're having and ask, are these thoughts a little too extreme? And how can I bring them closer to reality? What's most important here is to process your thoughts, to process your feelings related to those thoughts. Because when we don't process, when we try to shove down anything going on internally that's distracting and we feel like I don't have time for this, I need to push through. When we do that, all of that just waits for us. And it comes at us in ways that make things worse. Like if you're not dealing with difficult emotions and processing them, maybe you'll have trouble sleeping. Maybe you'll become more irritable. Maybe you'll become more reactive and impulsive and make more mistakes. So take time to really understand your thinking. And from that, a great thing happens. You realize that you're distant from those thoughts, and those thoughts really aren't controlling the show. You are, and you'll decide what to do about them. Limit distractions. We've talked a lot today about how we have so many distractions that are overwhelming, and there's no getting away from that. We're going to have more and more distractions as technology advances. So it's up to us to manage all those distractions, and we can start by managing technology. Many attorneys tell me they have to have their phones on all the time and with them because they have to answer calls right away and take action when someone is trying to reach them. And what that does is it makes them feel completely fractured in terms of their attention span. So I suggest what I've learned from the most successful attorneys, which is that if you want to have efficiency with your work and not get interrupted all the time, it's best to check your emails and text messages and voicemails 3 times a day, first thing in the morning, lunchtime, and before you end for the day. And it's hard to believe when you hear this for the first time, but clients really will adapt when you tell them, these are the times that I check for messages, and I will get back to you within this amount of time when I can. As long as your clients and your colleagues know how you operate this way and they know that that's reliable, they won't have a problem with it. In fact, they'll probably like it. So figure out, how can you use your technology to serve you instead of it constantly controlling you. So think about when you want your phone turned off, when you want your laptop and your iPad and everything else turned on, turned off, so that you're not always under its influence. And I've mentioned this before, and I'll say it again because it's so important, particularly right now where our news tends to be really chaotic because of the roller coaster going on with our government. It's important to minimize your exposure to that. And many attorneys tell me, well, I have alerts coming through on my phone all day because I need to know what's happening. This is really important. And I find that when attorneys reduce those alerts and just look at the news a couple of times a day and trust that if something really serious happens, someone is going to let them know, they tend to feel calmer. They're more focused on their work and they get more done in less time. Another way to limit distractions is to have what I call a whole person calendar. So you don't have the work calendar over here and the social calendar over here, just like there is no work-life balance with separation between. One calendar, and you put on that calendar everything that you value, which is generally you really value and show up for important work meetings and deadlines. But you have to regard your social life that way and the time you spend with yourself, taking care of yourself, relaxing, having fun. All of that is critical for you to be a successful attorney. So it needs to be protected. Instead of saying, well, I'm running over, I've got to have more work time, so I'm just going to cancel that massage, or I'm going to cancel lunch with my best friend. Got to get out of the habit of doing that and regarding work as the most important priority, and everything else is secondary. And say no to what doesn't serve you. That's a great message for today, whether it's clutter that doesn't serve you because it's just distracting you and causing stress, or people in your life who are negative, who you don't want to see as much or at all. Or maybe you joined a committee that you were really into a year ago and now you're not into it anymore, so you want to quit. Get out of obligations and throw out things, and design relationships to be more positive so that everything you have in your life is serving you, meaning it's helping you to feel good about yourself. It's helping you to take care of yourself. It's helping you to accomplish your goals with greater ease. And keep your momentum going, particularly on really tough days. It's really hard when you can't go home, when you have a deadline to meet and you're not feeling at your best, to get through that day. But you can do it if you develop these practices on just regular days. You'll find that doing these things I'm going to suggest will help you keep the momentum going when things really get tough. So number one is to regard your energy as your most valuable resource. And this is one of the number one ways you can get more control and command in your life when you feel things are out of control. We all have a certain amount of energy that we wake up with every day, and we get to decide where we want to put that. So looking at each day and asking, okay, I have, let's say I'm on a scale of 1 to 10, and I have 10 in terms of how much energy is required today, all the stuff I have to get done. And I feel like I'm at about a 7 right now in terms of meeting that requirement. So what am I going to drop from my schedule so that I can put my energy into what's really a top priority? So a good way to think about this is ask, okay, what's draining your energy, and pull out of those things. And then what, just like money, if you invest your energy and it gives back, and do more of that. Next, use work for breaks to refuel yourself, to refuel your energy. So doing this every day is important so that you have what you need in terms of stamina to get through those especially tough challenges at work when you really need to keep your momentum going and you're feeling like you're dragging. Um, every 90 minutes, most adults need a break from work. Because even if you think, oh, I'm really in the flow, I'm in the zone, and I've been working for 2 hours without a break, after 90 minutes, you may feel that way, but really what's happening is you're breaking down in terms of your focus and your energy level. So you're probably more apt to miss things. You're not as detail minded. You may feel creative, but you're less creative. You're losing your focus, you're running out of steam. So every 90 minutes, it's important to get up and refuel, meaning get up and do some movement, get up and have a glass of water. Better yet, go talk to somebody, but get away from your desk. One of the best things you can do during a break and as much as possible away from work is to get outside because multiple studies show that when you get outside, even for 5 minutes, you can boost everything, meaning your thinking power, your problem solving ability, your morale, your mood, your confidence. So getting outside for breaks is really great. I really recommend that. But when you do have time away from work, try to do things outside. Like getting out into the natural world and enjoying that. Because there's something about being in nature that really helps us to be healthy in every way. And then keep your eye on the why, meaning remember why you're working so hard. Because a lot of us, and especially attorneys, we get so caught in the grind of our daily work and caught up in the weeds that we forget why we're working and we get really discouraged and we feel like there's no end in sight and what does it matter and I'm not really making a difference. So think about why you're working hard and you'll probably come up with, well, I'm working hard because I want to send my kids to a private school, or I'm working so hard because I really want to go away this summer to Europe, or I want to have a really good retirement. Whatever it is, keep that in front of you so you can remember that. So maybe in your workspace, you post a photograph of where you want to go in Europe this summer, or you have a picture of your kids on your desk and you remember when you're feeling discouraged at work. They're the reason I'm working so hard. And then finally, um, take smart action steps. And what I mean by that is center on the goals over which you have control and try to let go of the rest. So we talked early on about this idea of getting rid of all stress. Many adults are trying to do that. And they're failing miserably because it's not possible. They have no control. Um, so what, after all these strategies we've gone over, do you really want to work on? Because everything I've talked about today, you have control over. And there's so many things you don't have control over, ranging from the court system to the weather to the government to how other people will respond to you. And when you let go of that, you feel like you have a more manageable life. And then what's really important, once you've figured on what you want to work on, what you want your goals to be, you've got to break those down into manageable increments. And athletes are great at this. When they train, they go just a little bit outside their comfort zone because they don't want to push their muscles too far. And then they rest. And then they go a little bit outside their comfort zone again. And, kids need to understand this. Kids start in school by learning addition and subtraction, then division, multiplication. They do that slowly over the years. And then in high school, they get to algebra and trigonometry and geometry. Yet adults want to do it all right now. They want to go from not knowing anything about a subject to knowing everything. They want to go to not knowing how to lawyer like an athlete at all to being a star lawyer like an athlete attorney. So breaking it down into really tiny steps. So I want to ask you before we end and get into questions, one thing. What one tiny change can you make to start lawyering like an athlete? It could be as simple as, I'm just going to call a friend sometime over the next week and tell them about this and see what they think. Or maybe I will ask if I can do a presentation for my firm on this to share what I learned. Or maybe I'll order Dr. Wood's book and read that gradually and see what I think of that. So One tiny change. It doesn't have to be huge. In fact, the tinier the step, the more likely you will accomplish it and get to the next step and the next and the next. And that's what a smart action step is.
Thanks, Amy. I I hate to cut you off,
Yep.
but
Well, we are done. So,
if people have questions for Amy, you could just email me. That's mlarson@montanabar.org, and I will forward them on to Amy.
okay,
So
great.
I'd like to thank you all for attending today, and that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Thank you, everybody. And have a good rest of your day.